I think you've got an announcement to make.
What announcement have I got to make, Ash?
You're going on holiday.
I'm going on holiday. Or I've just come back from holiday. Don't ask me how it was, though.
Yeah.
Because this podcast isn't a time machine.
No. How will it be?
How will it be? Oh, it will be awesome. I will be doing the things.
And where will you go?
I will remind myself and let you know when we record the next episode.
That was one of the strangest announcements. Even if the podcast was a time machine, that announcement made no sense.
I'm quite used to coming on here and saying things that make no sense.
Okay. No further announcements.
So, yes, I am going on holiday, but by the time you hear this, I'll have come back. So it's a bit confusing. It's the temporal distortion field of recording podcast episodes before they come out.
Yeah, yeah. Are you ready for some things?
Maybe.
Maybe. Based on our extremely complex fairness calculations, based on the previous episode and the person who went first.
But do you think we need to weight these calculations by the length of the discussion about each thing?
It depends where the discussion length is a positive weighting or a negative weighting.
Well, no, I feel like if a thing had a lot of time devoted to it, then that must mean that person whose thing it was got more benefit.
Are you saying that we've got more?
No, I'm not talking about the benefit to the world. What kind of fairness algorithm do you think we're entertaining here?
You sidetracked me slightly with that last comment.
Yes.
So total amount of time and the order in which the things were talked about in the previous episode.
We'll build a database and an API.
Yeah.
And I can do this really quickly. It will just say return. Ian can go first.
Right.
There's no need to do any calculation.
So, in the interest of fairness, I'm going to go first.
Yes, I think in both broad and narrow terms, you should go first.
Okay, so my thing this time is the smartphone-free childhood that I never had. No, I did have.
How? You're not that young, Ash.
No, I definitely had a smartphone-free childhood. I had a phone-free childhood.
Yes. No, I didn't have a phone-free childhood because we had one in our lounge.
Yeah.
And it was made of Bakelite and had a very loud ring.
Yeah, and had a very clacky...
Yeah, it had a dial. And my parents had one in their room. And if you dialed numbers on the one in the room, the one downstairs dinged quietly for each. So if you dialed a 9, you'd get 9 dings downstairs.
Oh yeah, and you could, if you had 2 in the house, you could pick up the phone
and both talk at the same time.
Both talk. It was amazing when you think about it, wasn't it? As a kid, I was like, this is amazing.
We have various family funny stories from my childhood of things with phones, like sitting listening to it dinging, and then one of my brothers running downstairs and saying, "I wasn't just ringing up so and so."
You were ringing someone else up. Yeah. So it's not that kind of phone-free childhood.
No, because
it's a more modern take.
Because the word phone, I mean, if we hadn't had telephones 50 years ago and 100 years ago, what would we call the things that we have now? Would we still call them telephones? Because telephones is Greek, isn't it? It's like tele for far away and
right, okay. Yeah.
Phone meaning sound or something like that. So it's far away sound, isn't it? So would we still call it that? Because talking on it is almost the last refuge of scoundrels.
Almost. Maybe if we'd stuck with the telegram, we'd all be walking around with smart grams.
Basically fax machines.
And they just have a constant ticker-tape of the things that are happening on our phones coming out. And everyone would just be walking around with really long strips of paper
coming out their pockets.
Yeah.
You'd be sitting in a party. You'd be standing in a party talking to people, and suddenly everyone's pockets would start sprouting reams of paper, and you'd be like, "Oh, they've called a general election."
It's like, I texted you an hour ago. It's like, hang on, I'll just go back through.
Yes. Yes, I feel as though we've missed out on something because we've had telephones in between telegrams and what we have now.
So this isn't about having a smart telegram-free childhood, because we've all had that, and we will continue to have a smart telegram-free childhood.
Yes, so it means we don't have to say stop in between each sentence.
Yeah, exactly.
Stop.
Well, that's quite fun, isn't it?
Yes, stop. Send help, stop. Go now, stop.
Stop.
Yes.
So circling back around to a smartphone-free childhood. So did you know that apparently
Crying with laughter.
I think we might be on course to beat the record for thing intro length for an unblemished 5th time in a row or whatever it is.
And now you've said that, we won't be able to edit it out. We can start this thing with you saying we're on course for a record for the world's longest thing intro length.
There's no way we're editing all this out.
No, it's gold. This is what people listen to us for, is to hear about ticker tape, mobile telegrams.
the smart telegram. All right. So before we dissolved into puddles of laughter, I was going to say that apparently 91% of 11-year-olds have a smartphone.
What happened to the other 9? No, sorry.
Well, you see, that's an interesting question as
the
well.
The remaining percentage.
Yeah. Well, apparently they might be made up of a small but growing number of agitators, or at least a very small subset of very loud people that say that this is very bad and children are missing out on their childhood. So we shouldn't give out smartphones to anyone who's under 16 because of various effects. So
they might learn how to deal with them.
Yeah. So apparently it's bad for your attention span. My attention span has got things to say about that, to be honest.
Sorry, what are we talking about again?
Exactly. And apparently there's bad things on the internet, which children of a certain age should not be able to access.
Okay, but we have to separate some of these things out from each other because bad things on the internet is a quite different problem to solve than...
Yeah. So there's a website called smartphonefreechildhood.co.uk, which celebrates a growing movement, or at least they say it's a growing movement, which ironically they use WhatsApp to organise themselves. Which, I understand. I mostly understand irony, but apparently it has a bunch of these bad effects on children, as in they're addictive, they correlate to mental health problems, they expose children to harmful content, and they reduce attention spans.
So the comedian, is it Jimmy Carr?
Mm.
Is that, have I got his name right?
Yeah.
He's a quite forthright gentleman.
He always starts everything with, this is going to end my career, but here's the joke.
Yeah, something like that. Well, I saw a clip of him recently in which he said something along the lines of, I love my children, so what do they want? They want McDonald's and playing video games all day.
Yeah.
And that's a recipe for fat, stupid adults. And do I want that? And then he talks about how he wants to love their potential.
Okay.
Rather than loving them by giving them what they necessarily want now.
Yeah.
Which I suppose is another take on that.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, it's one of those, it's nuanced, isn't it? And people would like us to think it's simple.
Yeah. I think, the smartphone-free childhood movement, if you like, does try to distill it down into, something simple and doesn't mention all the other, like you say, McDonald's, video games, and all the other things that kids and indeed adults want, but not necessarily. Yeah, exactly.
It's like living in the era of steam around here sometimes. These people chuffing along the pavement, blowing enormous clouds.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a lot of them are under 16.
Yeah. So I'm always like, we seem to want kids to have like other hobbies and then like simultaneously sell off all the playing fields and fill the world with sports utility vehicles, which are not involved in sports ever or utility. They're just vehicles. So rendering like the outside sphere very difficult to navigate. So I can't help but think that this is double standards on the part of a bunch of adults in a lot of ways. Because we all disappear into our screens for a long, long time. We all get that terrifying notification every Monday saying how much your screen time increased in the previous week.
Is this because you've got a new phone? That you
It tells me things now. I'm like, don't tell me that.
I try not to look in my Apple Screen Time app. Yeah. But yes, I think as adults, we don't model that behaviour very well. Maybe, I mean, obviously some people do, and some people don't. I find this quite interesting because my son George, who's, to be fair, 19, but he's very opinionated about this. He's very down on his smartphone.
Okay.
And for a while, he took up having a dumb phone.
Did he get the Nokia 3310 out again?
I'm not sure. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it drove me nuts because I wanted to talk to him in our family iMessages group.
Right.
And he didn't get the messages. And I wanted to.
He was just playing Snake or something.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, probably not even. The thing was that he opted him out of a lot of things that actually were quite useful. And, you know, he's working towards, he's sort of building he's trying to build a business and become an entrepreneur. And it's quite hard if you divorce yourself from a lot of the ways that people can get in touch with you.
Yeah.
And there is a terrible thing that happens when you're constantly being notified and distracted about communications.
Yeah.
But there's something that's also quite bad when you are divorced from them and you don't notice them.
Yeah, because some are useful.
Yes.
A lot of it is noise, but some are useful.
Indeed.
Even if you are probably even if you are a teenager or in your becoming a teenager years. So, you know, not having a smartphone might put you at a bit of a disadvantage to find some useful things.
I think that's true. And also accessing some kinds of information and help.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the thing is, it is addictive. There's no question that the behaviours, I mean, there's many things that are addictive. So sugar is addictive, nicotine, alcohol, all these things that we know are addictive. That is not a physical substance that you ingest, but it is still addictive and it generates the same behaviours, the same dopamine.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And, you know, I mean, we give kids sweets, don't we? We give them.
Yeah, yeah.
It is I guess what I'm feeling now at this point in my train of thought about it is that are we going to avoid giving children addictive things? Because that seems like a good idea.
Yeah.
Or are we just going to pick on one addictive thing and ignore all the others?
Yeah. It appears to be... so I think that when we had a Conservative government, they were quite keen on banning them entirely in schools, smartphones. I think schools do discourage them anyway, but it does seem to be like one of those lovely populist sort of topics where you can come up with a good policy and get people on board, and give a good message that you care about the future of children. But there's a kind of flip side to that as well, because most of life's important services are online now.
Yeah, and
there's groups of people who can't access them because they don't know what to do with technology. They don't know how to use phones, and they don't know how to use the internet well and email. That a lot of older people still don't have those skills. So it's like, how do you build those skills safely in order to make sure that people can access all the facilities and important services that they need, like for mental health and things like that are all online now.
And there's the nuance.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The boring answer is probably moderation, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. That's moderate smartphone use rather than moderated smartphone
use. Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Well,
probably both.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting to see the things that get put into and not put into things like Apple's screen time, which you can use to moderate your children's phones. You can lock them up so that they can't. You can do things like, okay, you can go on Instagram, but only for 15 minutes a day.
Yeah.
And you can never use this, or during these times, everything is unavailable apart from that. There's a lot of sort of ways you can sort of tune that.
Yeah. So, but I guess the smartphone-free childhood is like it's the simplification of that. It's like I don't wish to engage with all of that. I just want it not to be a problem. And also, I think there's some nostalgia there as well, where it's like, my childhood was this, therefore...
And the only thing that's changed since then is the introduction of smartphones.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's just kind of this gross oversimplification of decades worth of change.
But people love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I always probably said this before on this podcast, but I always remember the Yes Minister episode where Sir Humphrey, who's a civil servant, is addressing another civil servant and explaining the realities of life to him by saying, all the British people want to know is who are the goodies and who are the baddies. And then he goes on to say, but unfortunately, sometimes we have to do deals with the baddies or work with them for something. And sometimes we have to not help the goodies when they're in trouble. And, you know, the idea is the British people must never know. But this is good and this is bad, but nothing's purely good or purely bad.
Yeah. There was another interesting article on a kind of on a related note. It was in the Guardian about kids and video games, and why do kids need to disappear into video games? And it basically said, we've created a terrible world for them. So their desire for distraction and disappearing into digital worlds is now getting stronger and stronger because the actual world doesn't feel like it was geared towards them.
But I don't think that's any different from me. When I was a kid, I read The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And I disappeared into that for hours, and it was a book.
Yeah.
And, you know, the same people are probably who are saying video games are terrible probably wouldn't say that same thing about books.
Yeah.
But actually, a good video game is all about telling a story that you get to participate in. So in that way, it's more compelling and immersive, perhaps, than a book was. But it's still the same thing I didn't enjoy being a teenager whatsoever. I really hated it. And being able to disappear into The Lord of the Rings or other books that I read was my escapism.
Yeah. But did you refuse to come out of it?
Well, I used to read... I got in trouble in my primary school for they had desks with little drawers immediately under them, and I would put a book in the drawer and just read it rather than take part in the lesson. And I used to read when I was meant to be in bed, asleep. Yeah. So in that sense, Yeah, I always used to get comments when I was young that I read too much. And I was like, I don't know if it was a problem. Maybe, I don't know what the expectation was with how much I should read, how much I should play video games, how much I should use my smartphone. But again, we kind of circle around to it again, don't we? It's like, what is the expectation for using all these different mediums of consuming information? So does it really change over the years? I guess is what you're alluding to, isn't it? It's like, and there's like a degree of escapism, and the escapism has just changed. And we're just, and there's always a movement against it. Always people who say, oh, there's too much of this or too much of that. But it's just the medium that's changed. Yes, I think that's true. But we also come back to enshittification, don't we?
Yeah.
Because the problem with your phone and the things that are on it that are addictive is that there are basically the Instagram and these other sort of big services have hired psychologists to maximise the stickiness of people's attention in those things. And everyone I know at some point or other has gone on Instagram and wasted an hour and a half just mindlessly scrolling. And these things are literally designed to be addictive, to give dopamine hits in such a way that it really it keeps you in. Yeah. Keeps you locked in.
Yeah.
And I think that wasn't true of the things we had in our childhoods.
Yeah.
I mean, sweets. I mean, sugar is addictive. They're
Yeah.
probably, you know, things like that. But
Okay, so you've got like there's so that I guess it's back into the nuance, isn't it? So you've got the actual smartphone itself is like the delivery mechanism in itself. It's not there's nothing wrong with a feed of images of people,
that you know.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing inherently wrong with that. But then how it's all been designed within the applications that deliver those feeds is designed to give you the maximum dopamine hit and keep you scrolling up
Yeah.
for as long as humanly possible. So there's this. So the smartphones themselves are just they're just like a gateway into a set of applications which are designed very, very specifically for addiction.
Yeah.
And to make sure that they keep your focus and they sort of keep you viewing their content and their advertisements.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems to me that if you're a parent and you want to do the best thing for your child, then you do want to stop them from... It would be nice if they could leave their childhood not addicted to anything.
Yeah.
And so as a good parent, you feel like, oh, I want to do these things. I want to moderate their smartphone use, or in some cases, apparently, ban them. Although my experience is that when things are banned, they normally find a way around it.
Yeah.
But
especially alluring for younger people as well when you ban things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Suddenly it just seems to make you want to do it even more.
It does. And there's always going to be a spectrum of attitude. So whenever they're going to school, some people are going to have these things. Some of their friends will have them, others might not. So actually, it's really hard being a parent. And one of the things that happens is that you've got, as an adult, you've got a limited store of energy to do stuff with.
Yeah.
And if one of the things you have to do is spend hours fighting with your kids about are they allowed this and are they allowed that? And can you please lift this restriction so they can do that thing? It's pretty tiring.
Yeah.
On top of the fact that we're all working longer hours for arguably less money in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
These things have a very great benefit for the parents in the sense that they may be storing up pain for their child in the future in some sort of way. But actually, they have to live through the present, the parents.
Yeah.
And sometimes with, the level of stress and time and work that they're dealing with already, it's kind of asking them to do this on top of that is a very big ask. I mean, is it realistic even?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's probably just been added to the list of things that fall into that particular category, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
that need to be moderated.
I mean, if you're going on a long journey, do you want? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
Yeah.
I want this. Give me that. Or do you want blissful silence while they play Pokemon Go or something? It's that version of the decision is quite different than this. Anyway, I suppose the answer is it's nuanced, like everything.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like campaigns like this are just sort of an oversimplification of the world and a desire to replicate a childhood that maybe you didn't even have. But nostalgia pushes us down that route as well. So, I don't know. I'm always wary of calls to ban, veto, things that are an integral sort of part of life, that a lot of important social interactions and functions that you need to access are present on these, via your smartphone. So it's about coming up with a sensible, moderate approach to using these devices, which I don't think as adults we particularly do particularly well.
No.
So I'm like, well, maybe we could model the right behaviour ourselves before going back trying to deny children access to the things that we absolutely take for granted.
Yeah. So
that was my thing, the smartphone-free childhood and the oversimplification of a complicated world.
Yes, I think that's a really great one. And I think parents wrestle with this all the time, these kinds of demands.
Yeah.
And, I think we should cut parents some slack because it's bloody hard.
Okay.
Well, have we got any interlude-y things to talk? Oh, we could talk about Ilkley Live.
Yeah.
That might be quite interesting. That should have been an announcement.
You kind of destroyed the announcements with your wibbly wobbly, timey wimey holiday. I'll tell you where I'm going when I get back.
No, it wasn't. I'll tell you where I'm going when I get back. I'm trying to position myself after I get back and say I've forgotten, but next episode I'll be able to remember.
So Ilkley Live.
Ilkley Live, yes. So this is a sort of interlude mini announcement.
Yeah.
So Ilkley Live is a music festival that's taking place this weekend in Ilkley, and it's very good. And I did the website for it because I'm a nerd.
So this is at venues and in people's gardens.
All around the town.
All around the town.
And it's free, and it has currently like 93 performances in it.
Amazing.
Which was 10 times more than the first one 4 years ago.
Yeah. And what's your favourite feature of the website, Ian?
My favourite, my least favourite feature is the alleged caching that's meant to be happening of API calls. I've got a bit of a bill for that.
Cache invalidation, naming things.
Yes.
Very difficult.
Yes. That could be a thing, couldn't it?
Definitely.
Naming things especially. So my favourite feature of the website is that you can pick from the program what you want to go and see. And because there's 93 things or whatever, there's a lot of program, but you can go through it and choose the things you want to see, and then you can go and there's a nice My Program page where you get a nice summary of all the things you're going to do and tells you how long it takes to walk between things using the Google Maps Distance Matrix API. And then if you tap on the little pictures of the maps, you get a nice Google Maps or Apple Maps directions on your phone that help you walk there. So very pleased with that feature.
Just need to encourage the people to use it now, don't we?
We do, yes. So I think by waiting till after the festival to release a podcast episode to tell people to do that, they will be very happy that they...
Set yourself a reminder for next year.
Yes, indeed. So, but yeah, so I'm excited about I love being involved in Ilkley Live, and I'm very excited about it. And the fact that I'm going on holiday on the second day of it, so missing half of it is a bit of a shame. But no, it's not, because I'm looking forward to going on holiday in the past.
Which is your present. So, Ian, seeing as we fairly attributed the first thing in this episode to me, then I believe it's only right that you should follow up with the second thing.
Yeah, but I think the priority of this thing should be raised because of the 6 hours we spent talking about the first one.
6 hours? Has it been 6 hours already?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, fair enough. Well, we'll do a...
I've told myself a million times not to exaggerate.
So, Ian, please introduce your thing.
Shut up and introduce your thing. Yes, so my thing's a little on the nerdy side, but unusually specific for me. So my thing is pull requests. I think it's probably useful to quickly explain what that is.
Okay.
In fact, I'm going to try and get you to explain what that is, because I feel like I'm not completely sure I've got a complete grip on it. Have you used it much?
I've used it extensively.
Good. Then you've used it more than me.
So lots and lots of software development teams use Gitflow, I believe the name of the particular technique, where you will have a mainline branch, thankfully now called main, generally, not master. We've got rid of all that parlance, thankfully. And then, say if you want to build a new feature, you will then take the current mainline branch and create a new branch off that one and start to make your changes. So you'll change the files that you need to change, add the ones that you need, delete the ones that you don't, and then you'll commit the changes on that branch, and then you will create something called a pull request, which shows you all the changes that have been made
In that
versus the target branch, which is your mainline branch, whatever. And then tools like GitHub will give you a lovely interface to view all the changes. Well, it's relative. I'm so used to looking at it that, well, it's probably, it must be one of GitHub's like most used features, one would imagine.
Yeah.
Visually at least. So then you can look at all the changes that have been made and you can compare them to the mainline branch visually.
And the way that is used is that as a developer, or most commonly used, I should say, is as a developer, you do all your work. So let's say you're implementing a personal program feature for the Ilkley Live website.
Yes.
See what I did there. You might do all the work of that, and then you would raise a pull request and that would have all the changes you'd made in order to do that.
Yep.
And the idea is that someone looks at the content of the pull request to see if you're doing anything crazy or you've misunderstood something or it doesn't work in the way they think it should.
Whatever standards you've agreed or whatever it is.
And then only when they approve that does it then get merged into the mainline branch, which means it appears in the live version of the application.
Yeah.
So that's a pull request. And that feature's been around for a long time, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it was invented because of open source projects where someone would be the maintainer of an open source package and somebody else would like to contribute to that package. That somebody else might make a new branch, as Ash has described, make all their changes, and then they would ask the maintainer of the package to review their changes and approve it being incorporated into the main application. And I think that context has really set it up for the people who think that pull requests are a terrible thing.
Yeah.
And we'll get onto that in a second.
Yeah.
But it's kind of that environment is where untrusted sources are making changes to your application, and you need to make sure that then with varying levels of assurance, given past discussions that we've had on this podcast, with varying levels of assurance. But if that developer is untrusted, then you need to check before you can accept their code. And that's the context of pull requests were for open source projects. Mm-hmm. And there's a chap called Alan Holub who attracted my attention to this kind of thing, where he wrote a tweet back in 2021 where he says, I think PRs, and he means pull requests, obviously not public relations people, are a really bad idea. And the really has surrounded by underscores to indicate the emphasis. They make sense in an isolated individual open source model, which we just talked about, but are an anti-pattern in most business development contexts where collaboration, e.g. mobbing, another definition we're going to have to provide in a second, is possible. So code reviews aren't needed. PRs just add dependencies, delays, and bottlenecks. So he's basically saying that in that open source environment, it's fine, where you've got untrusted blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. But in businesses where you've got people who you're paying and you're really guarding against errors rather than malfeasance.
So you've got a team that is ostensibly working together to deliver the changes, the changes that are needed.
Yes.
So to have this extra process seems it adds delay and dwell time into how you deliver. And you should be working together closely on this code anyway, right?
Well, you would think.
So why do you need to do that?
So he's talking about mobbing and pair programming.
Yeah.
So pair programming is where instead of having one developer working on something, two developers sit at the same computer and work on it.
Yeah.
And you have a driver and a navigator model, don't you? So the driver writes the code and the navigator notices the things that the driver might not have noticed. So they talk and between them produce the code.
Yeah.
Which Alan Holub might say is a better way of reviewing code. Review it at the time it's being created rather than having a delay and then reviewing it.
Fair.
And mobbing. So what do we think? What's mobbing?
So I guess mobbing would be usually the entire team working on the same thing, and you have a similar sort of driver and navigator, but you rotate that through the team. and other team members might be doing research on libraries that you're talking about using, or doing a review of the user story or whatever it is. But while you're working on it, asking questions of product people, you basically have all the activities that you would usually have on a feature or story or however it is you split it up. But you're doing them together, and you're rotating who's actually writing the code. But in general, you've got everyone has a laptop or whatever it is, but you've got the code up on a big screen and one person kind of working.
One person is working on it. So it's like a pair programming, but it's one to N rather than one to one.
Yeah, absolutely. And the theory is that obviously you just work on one thing all together until it's done, rather than splitting off and working on multiple things, which is often where the need for pull requests pops up, isn't it? Because everyone's gone off to work on their thing, so you end up with a pull request for each. Yeah. Well, yeah, pretty much. I mean, for some people, mobbing and pair programming is quite scary, depending on like your previous work habits, your personality type, how much time you're comfortable spending with others. So I think often, obviously, in a tweet context, it's a very short statement to say, well, where collaboration, e.g. mobbing, is possible. And of course it is, but I think there's probably like a path to go on to get to those points where you can all comfortably sit together as a team and mob for a significant period of time, because it's pretty like high concentration, high focus activity. Personally, when I've done pairing and mobbing, by the end of the day, I'm absolutely exhausted. And I'm a person who probably needs like some time to go off and think about problems in my own space as well. So
pairing and mobbing, maybe some people would quite struggle with.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's something you would need to practice. Be aware of like how much of it you can handle as an individual on a given day. Like I said, whenever I've done it in the past, I've been absolutely exhausted.
It's a funny one, isn't it? So he's basically, the things that he's really down on about pull requests is the length of time in between I've finished the code and then you're waiting for someone to review it.
Yeah.
And the person who's reviewing it has to context switch into that activity. And then it's likely that when they give you that review back, you have to context switch into remembering what you had done. And you might find that actually there's a lot of context switching involved in doing that, which is a bit of a killer. I mean, I think people who are writing code like to be given uninterrupted periods of focus to do it in, not having to keep changing. I mean, the big one is obviously, I keep having to go to meetings instead of writing code.
Yeah.
But actually, I keep having to switch back to code I wrote 3.5 hours ago or yesterday in order to enact these comments that somebody's made, who themselves had to stop doing what they were doing in order to do it. He's basically saying that's a very poor way. Yeah. That really saps your velocity.
Yeah. I mean, speaking as a tester, because testing and reviewing at pull requests have some similar problems, as in they're done usually after the person who wrote the code has sort of finished it, tied it up, and put it into a presentable state, which they're happy to put in front of other people. So you're asking them to context switch back for testing as well as like reviewing a pull request. I think within it, there's problems within pull requests, as in they're too large. I've seen plenty of 100-file PRs, which are very difficult to review and test because there's just too much. There's no way that a person's brain, the pull request process completely breaks down, because if you've changed 100 or 200 files, you've changed the whole system.
Yeah.
So don't worry about a pull request too much.
Is that where the review comment is, looks fine to me?
Yeah, pretty much. So you got like the size of the pull request, and then sometimes based off that, like how long they are open for, because then other things change around them, and then they need to be updated.
Yeah.
So it's like having like a long running pull request is a problem there as well,
because the branch begins as a copy of whatever the current state of the main code is.
Yeah.
And if you make a branch and you make a lot of changes, say for a week, and then other people have been changing that main branch over the course of that week, the chances that your changes are going to conflict with theirs grows and grows, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I don't know. I think PRs in general, I think it's always important to separate the idea of a PR from seeing them done.
The way people actually use it in practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think there's kind of skills and behaviours issues as well. So if you feel like you can't split something down, or you don't see the value in splitting something down to make it easier to review or easier to test, then there's like a training and knowledge issue there, I think, because it's actually really valuable to make them as small as you can while still obviously delivering a meaningful chunk of code, because it allows you to sort of progress to the next stage of it. So I think whether PRs are bad, I just think that most of the time they're probably done quite badly, and it's because there's like skills and behavior issues where it's just like, I've seen plenty of devs who are like, oh well, I know it's a 200 file PR, but there's no other way to get the job done, so here you go. As a tester, you're like, well, thanks very much. And then you would then have to like almost reverse engineer the PR to pick out all the things that need to be tested.
And actually what you would have wanted was for the developer to have done one of the things.
Yeah.
And then done a PR for that.
Yeah.
And then done one of the things after that and done a PR for that, so that you're involved all the way through rather than having some massive thing at the end.
Yeah. Because there's also the concept of rejecting PRs as well, which is part of the PR process. So I guess one of the other challenges with pull requests as well is that it's quite, it's somewhat personal. So if you raise a PR and someone comes back with loads of comments or requests changes on GitHub, there's like a button where you can say, I want to request changes to this, then it cannot be merged until that person has, their changes made, or they take the request changes status off it, which is really interesting. It is about power as well. So I remember one place that I worked, you needed 2 approvers, but it was never about like how good your code was or how valuable it was. It was about the people who could get 2 approvals got their pull requests merged. So as long as you were if you were influential enough to get approvals, then your pull requests would get merged. If you had less friends, and you didn't go for lunch with everybody, you had problems getting your PRs merged. So I guess that's probably like here. I think Alan talks about like the sort of a lot about the technical part of it, but it's deeper than that. It's a very like team dynamic-y thing in order to get your pull requests merged. So
we can't say pull requests are bad. We can just say teams' practices can be.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you had a constant flow of small pull requests with a limited number of changes in them, which built towards a wider feature, which were easy to review, easy to test, and then could be merged
regularly
with a few minutes or hours of them being raised, then I don't see, between that and say trunk-based development where you make your changes directly onto the mainline branch behind feature toggles, say, I don't see like there's a huge difference there. Not huge in terms of time. It's just in terms of how the practice is being used. It's being used to store up change. It's being used to do 2 big changes. It's being used as and then those people who can't get the approvals that they need because they don't have the soft skills that they need.
Yeah.
There's just so much in there that makes me think, PRs, pull requests, are they so bad, or is it all the stuff that like pulls underneath it?
Yeah, perhaps we're aiming our guns at the wrong thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's like an anti-pattern which probably hides multiple anti-patterns underneath it.
Yes. I mean, he says here, it's a problem even if you wait only for a few hours. I've never seen a PR process where the review happened within seconds of the commit and happened verbally rather than by written comment.
Yeah. So, but again, that's a team thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And if you did that,
Yeah.
if you did it differently, so it was very quick,
Yeah.
then I think so really it's how do you do code reviews is the real question. How do you review what somebody's done and help them make it better before it gets, without introducing a lot of friction?
Yeah. Yeah. So I quite like a good like review checklist because it enables you to add things like security issues, into the review process, which when you pair might get picked up, might not. Hard to tell. Depends on like the context, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, so really what I'm getting from this is that it all depends on how the team uses it, because it permits very poor usages.
Yeah.
It can be quite destructive and obstructive.
Yeah.
But actually, if you could design a way of working with it that could be a lot better, although Alan would say it's almost never a good thing.
Yeah.
But, it could. There are certain ways we could decide to use it that would make it a lot better than some examples.
I think like you raised a really good one where it's like, if you've created a pull request, if you're a remote team or, a team who is co-located, then it's your pull request. So speak to some people about it and talk them through what you've done.
Don't throw it into the void.
Don't put it in a Slack channel which says, please can I have reviews on this? Because then immediately you've added sort of dwell time to it.
Yeah, and people thinking, do I want to add this to my workload or not? No.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas if you're willing to actually walk people through it, then that makes an absolutely enormous difference to how quickly they get merged. I think this sort of desire especially for in development teams in organizations, to delegate that to a Slack channel, which people may or may not pick up.
Yeah.
That's another anti-pattern within the team. Because it's like, well, actually, even if you have worked on something on your own and not in a paired or mob context, then it's your pull request, you've raised it. So, explain it to people, and then you can get good feedback there and then.
Yes, and sit people down and do it.
Yeah.
So there's not necessary to maybe go through using the full ability of the tool to make comments and then raise these request changes, all this stuff that you were talking about. Actually, it can just be a conversation and done very quickly. Yeah. There's one more thing I wanted to sort of put to you that he had said. And he said, neither pull request triggered code review nor hardening sprints. I don't really know what that means. Improve quality. He quotes W. Edwards Deming, who came up with Lean, that inspires a lot of the way that these things are desired to work anyway. And he said, inspection does not improve nor guarantee quality.
Yeah.
Inspection is too late. The quality, good or bad, is already in the product. You cannot inspect quality into a product.
But that's assuming that that your code review is an inspection.
Yes.
Rather than a communication between...
Conversation.
Yeah. So I do see what he's saying. And because it depends, again, how you use what you're doing, how you use pull requests as a process. So I understand where he's coming from. So people do use it as an inspection, like a checklist. Especially so the other dynamic is only the lead, say, or principal developer does code review.
Oh.
Yeah. So they sit in their ivory tower and decree from on high whether or not something can be merged. Because I've met a couple of lead and principal developers who solely have merge rights, and it will only be anything that goes into the main line is only by their. But again, that's an organizational problem, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
manifested as part of a pull request.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's very interesting. So I feel a bit more. I think I understand it a bit more now.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Well, I think are pull requests and all the process around it the optimal way for a internal development team within an organization to work? No, it's not, because it does add delay and it does add dwell time. if you had a set of developers who were skilled enough to do trunk-based development, to develop directly on the main line via test-driven development, and make small changes behind feature toggles which are meaningful, that sounds wonderful, doesn't it? But it's not reality.
Where do you get that team from?
Yeah, exactly. I've never worked on a team like that, like ever. I know it's a good thing to aspire to. So I agree with Alan in it's an aspirational thing to get there, but there's different ways to get there using pairing, mobbing, and all those other practices. And that all sounds great, but it's a hard thing to get there. You're not going to get there particularly quickly. No. So I think the path for me would be to say, take a team that uses pull requests as their main method of code review, then say, right, okay, well, let's introduce some pairing. Let's try and keep our pull requests as small as we can so they can be reviewed together and merged easily, and try and avoid the whole 100-file PRs issue. Oh, one of my other favourites as well is when you branch off a branch, which is one of the side effects of using pull requests. So you start a feature and you've got multiple people working on it, and then first person branches off the main line, and then the second person needs something on the first person's branch, so they branch off the first person's branch, and then it all just turns into a complete mess, because it always does. So, but again, that's like you haven't split it correctly, or in a way that means that you could work on it easily. It means that what you've done is you're kind of stuck with this thing that everyone needs on one branch, and then everyone else branching off that branch. So I try and squash that as soon as I see it. But again, that's one of the behaviors that does come from pull request culture and process, is that when you can't split it down, sometimes you end up branching off a branch, off a branch, off a branch. And then before you know it, you've got no idea. And most of the time I see that work thrown away.
Yeah.
Because it just
becomes too hard.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a wonderful, very short YouTube video illustrating merging, git merge. Yeah. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't actually.
It's very short. I'm going to show it to you now,
okay,
and then you can enjoy it, and then I'll put a link to it in the notes.
That seems familiar to me.
It's the last guy that falls down. I find it quite funny.
And then one of the other things that's always on my mind with pull requests is rebasing as well. So say if your pull request has 20 changes in it, 20 commits, and for whatever reason the team have decided that it needs to be nice and tidy. So you squash all those commits into one commit, and then only then can you then merge it into the main line. Which I always found really annoying, because it's like, well, say if something goes wrong, which it always does, then you could always go back to the changes that actually made the problem appear. Whereas if you squash them all together, then you just have one big blob, and then you're stuck with another big blob. So there's loads and loads of weird behaviours around pull requests, which make them seem like so terrible. But I don't know if it has to be. And I'm always wary of criticising the thing based on how people use the thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's the age-old thing, isn't it? Do we ban knives, which would stop us from being able to cut up our food when we eat, because people use them to do bad things?
Yeah. Should we ban smartphones? Because it's demolished our attention spans. There's bad things on the internet. They're obviously addictive.
We talked about that recently, didn't we?
Yeah, I think so.
Can't remember. Or is that having a bad memory rather than a short attention span? I think maybe my joke is flawed.
Yeah. So anyway, if you get 100-file PR, just put "looks good to me."
Excellent.
Yeah.
So you heard it here first.
Straight from the tester.
Straight from the tester.
Let's just say, or just reject it, but don't say anything to anyone. Just reject it on GitHub. Right? And then when someone says, "What the hell are you doing?" just say,
it looked good to me.
Looked terrible to me. Rejected. So yeah.
Just request changes, but just a really tiny change.
Request
add
changes, do it again.
Please add the word "the" into the comment in this file. Rejected. So that was my thing. I hope the nerdiness of it didn't leave too many people behind.
I think it's more about teams and communication
Yeah, it is.
than it is about the actual technical practices.
Well, it's more the nature of our conversation about it.
Yeah.
Where we said lots of jargon.
Yeah.
And I think we explained most of it, hopefully.
Yeah. So whenever you go to a new organization, you look at how they deal with merging code. It will tell you everything you need to know about that organization.
Yes.
And how they behave.
If it's like the YouTube video that I showed Ash, which you can find in the comment in the show notes, in the comments. What are we? A YouTube video, which you can find in the show notes. Then you will have a more visceral appreciation of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was 2 things.
It was 2 things. Blimey.
We've rattled through those for us. We've rattled through those 2 things.
That's going to be easy to edit at only an hour and a quarter. Not our 90-minute,
yes,
105-minute extravaganzas.
We do like an extravaganza.
We do.
So what's the email address to contact us, Ian?
Well, I'm going to say it's technologyeors@whatalotofthings.com.
And
But
now it has been tested, therefore it works.
But only if you can spell technology eors.
Yes, that's true.
We'll put it in the notes.
Yeah, yes, I think that's a good idea.
Are there any other final thoughts? I always remember, do you remember Jerry Springer? The late Jerry Springer, who used to have this reality show where people would come on it and talk about how their girlfriend's brother had done something, and then they would all get together and fight each other. And then there would be bouncers who would come on and try and separate them, but it was all a bit half-hearted. I think the fighting was part of the attraction. And then at the end, Jerry Springer would record a kind of, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, ironic little thing about how we should all be nice to each other, or how you should watch out for this, or you should do this. And he was always like his final thought. And I always feel like maybe we should try and have a final thought. That sounds a bit terminal, doesn't it? When I say it like that.
It does.
Here's my final thought.
I want to have a few more thoughts.
Yeah. yes.
I'm into having a few more years of thoughts.
Yes, I think
before giving my final thoughts. That's my final thought on that.
Well, you might keep your final thought. Maybe no one will ever know what it is.
I think it's probably
like something like oh shit.
Yeah, it's like people often ask me, "What do you think about when you go running?" And I say, "I think it's quite warm, isn't it? Or it's raining, or I'm tired, or I feel quite good, or there's a big hill,
or nothing,
or nothing." These are the things that I think about when I go running.
Yeah,
I don't have any deep, unmeaningful realizations.
So I sometimes have deep and meaningful realizations while having a shower.
Yeah.
But I never have any way of recording them. And my attention span is not long enough to retain them. So basically they are lost to history.
Yeah.
Maybe I should put one of those sort of little whiteboard things in there with a little pen hanging on it. And then I can write some
kind of shorthand.
Kind of shorthand that will then wash off.
Steam off.
We've got a bit of a problem in our house at the moment, which is that the boiler's broken. So if we want to have a shower, it's going to be ice cold.
Some people very much subscribe to that.
So we've been going to the gym a lot, which has not involved much in the way of exercise, but has involved having showers.
Yeah. Yes, I've used that particular strategy before.
So it'd be even less likely that I'll be recording any deep thoughts while in the gym's shower.
Yeah. Okay.
So thank you for listening, everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you, Ian.
And thank you, Ash. And it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from him.